This is a war for the world. It is a war to control the future of human development and capture control of the human species. This is a war of the world. This genuinely is a world of the war. A war, a world of war. This is a war of the world. Yes, this is genuinely a war of the world. It is a war to control the future of human development and capture control of the human species. To control the future of human development and control the future development, future human development, and capture control. Control human development and capture control. That is the plan that we are facing. That is what we are facing, my conscious ones. Tonight live, we're talking about the real issue that is important, the real problem that we have as humans having an experience in this life on this earth. Genuinely, we are in a war for the world. We're in a war to control human development and capture control of human life. That is the topic for tonight. How do we fight? How do we ensure ourselves that we will not become slaves? How do we do that? We are genuinely in a war for the world. A war that wants to control human development and capture the freedoms and capture who we're supposed to be. This is the reason for the live. What are we going to do? How are we going to ensure? How are we going to stand up and fight against this war that we're in right now, which is for our freedom, which is to continue to be sovereign, continue to have free will, to be normal and fully and happy and God created divine source energies, divine souls. What do we do? Because right now we are definitely, genuinely in a war of the world where technically the war is to control human development and capture control. That's it. They want to stop us. Okay? That's right. And this is the thing. It may sound strange, but it sounds strange until you woke up and you didn't have a job if you didn't get that COVID vaccine, right? Yeah. It was all fun and games until, you know, you couldn't get toilet paper, right? And you were standing in a line and yeah. And so don't write this off as some conspiracy theorist, some rant, some rat. No, it's not about that. It's about just opening your eyes, using your looking eyes, open up your mind, look what's around you, understand that Everything is not as it appears. There's a lot of smoke and mirrors going on. Everything seems normal. Yeah, you get up every day, you go to work, you have your husband, you have your wife, you have your children, you have your friends, you have your family. Yeah, and it's all safe and it's all good until, you know, we wake up, turn on the news, and it's another onslaught. It's another frontal assault on our freedom in some type of sick, twisted, and like subliminal way. You understand what I'm saying? Like you gotta understand, government was never about like the people's interests. It was always about protecting the interests of themselves and their higher buddies. So you have to understand, but in a sense, that's what it was manipulated as, you know, because I do believe in the founding fathers. I do believe that, um, you know, initially the plan was even with, you know, how we created these, you know, United States, that the founding fathers, you know, many of them were God-fearing men. You know, they weren't perfect men, but you know, God and all and a certain spiritual energy was very present, and right in the Constitution of America. So at the end of the day, I feel like, you know, just with us being people, there's a certain like just there's a vibration, there's energy, and so together we all beat, you know, we all vibrate, you know, at the beat of the universe, and that's what we are. And it's unfortunate that that was okay, but you know, you had some very evil men that became, and so as a result of those evil men and their evil minds, their evil plans and thoughts, those men, you know, congregated and came together and established, you know, some real nefarious uh, ways and laws to which, you know, would bring about a division amongst the people, and therefore, as we know, divide and conquer, right? And so, you know, you when you think about things like racism and classism and all those type of things, it's like all of those things. That's kind of just like, I mean, yeah, it happened, but it's not really what it appears to be. Those were just like, I don't know how to like terms it, but those were just kind of like side, what do you call it, like distractions. Those were like sidebars. Those were things that were just thrown in society to cause a division and to always keep a division. So I always say to myself, it never was about black or white. It never was about um, you know, ri- in a way rich or poor, but not even really, because, well, more so about rich then, because if you were rich, then you're, you know, you may have leverage, you may be about, you know, whatever, you know, you may have some connections, or you may know someone, or you may have a certain bloodline, or what have you. But, you know, in terms of like the whole race thing, you know, that definitely was created not out of hate, out of, you know, manipulation, and um, by way of suggestion, you know, and again, a ploy to cause division, to cause dissension, to cause mistrust, and to take the divine, the light, the unity, the automatic connection that we have as human beings to each other and love, and just cause all of those things to, you know, uh, to ultimately dissolve, because, you know, that's what suffering brings. It brings pain, it brings indifference, it brings separation. And so again, if I could separate people, and tell them, okay, well, this one is this color, that one is that color, and that's why you should hate each other. It doesn't matter why you should hate each other. The real point of the matter, the real reason behind the technology is that we just want division, you know, because we know as a people united, then the chances of, government takeover, the chances of, government staging a coup, the chances of there just being just like really just a crazy takeover and a dismantling of what we know as life and our rights and liberty and laws and all of that stuff. They know that they can't just do that. That takes time. These globalists, the technocrats, the shadow government, that's how they work. Everything happens incrementally. So, little by little, over the decades, over the decades, over the decades, over the decades, there's been systems put into play to keep division. There's been entities created to reinforce those divisions. And so at the end of the day, you know, um, it's been a tool, it's been refined, it's been doubled down on, and to this day, here we are, still divided, still like disconnected from just our own soul kind, our own soul sister, our own soul brother. And that's not about a black or a white thing, but just like a soul thing, a divine thing, you know? And so it's like taking us out of our true habitat, our true ecosystem, which is divine love, light, and peace, because we are created from the divine. And so that means that we too are divine. So now, if you have a divine people, and that's white people, that's black people, it's not about a religious thing, it's not about a color thing, it's just about a natural soul thing. You are a soul, you are a conscious soul, you are actually in human form having this experience. That's what it's about. So that when these factions know the true essence of people, know the true essence of souls, the divine that we have within. It's about connection, it's about love. And ultimately, I mean, as a sidebar, I'm going to say that I do believe that we're going to get back there. It's just going to take some time. I believe that we're getting back there. I definitely believe it. Like, I'm never going to be one of the people that say, oh my God, like society is just going to hell, like there's no good people, like the world is just this, that. No, I'm sorry, call me what you want, but I still believe in my divine souls. I still believe in the power of love to be the most transforming, the most healing, the most changing, um, life changing, or changing for the better, or whatever the case may be, force that we have, that exists. Love. Nothing vibrates at a higher frequency than love. And so that's who we are. That is our true essence in nature. And it's by the means of many dark men that we find ourselves having this experience of this darkness. And so there is a war for the world. I absolutely believe they are planning an enormous assault on our freedom, and we must figure out the best way to counter their designs. Yeah, I agree. They are definitely, trust me, they're planning a bad assault on our freedoms. They are planning for us. They want our freedom. They want us to be fully controlled. And this is where the darkness comes in at, because they don't want us to be our true selves in the essence, which is to have our free will, to have love. They want us to be mindless, to be emotionless. They want us to be really like robots, if you will. If you hear some of this stuff, it's going to really trip you out. But let's keep going. Listen to this. This is what Klaus Schwab and his Davos buddies feel. Similarly, industry and society must come together to focus on empowering both people and organizations by democratizing access to intelligence to help solve our most pressing challenges. For example, if AI is one of technology's top priorities, healthcare is surely one of AI's most urgent applications. Coupled with mixed reality, the cloud, and business optimization tools, AI will be central to healthcare transformation underway on the science bench, in the clinic, and throughout medical center operations. That sounds crazy. Who knows what that means? It's insane. But listen to this. Trust is not something we give people. In the absence of a robust system of transparency and accountability, there have been too many examples in history when trust has been misplaced. Nadella wants to repeat the mistakes of the past when he writes. This is a guy that's like a crony of Klaus Schwab. The biggest problem is antiquated laws that are ill suited to deal with contemporary problems. Could you imagine the government creating a new child care program where they told you that you couldn't observe the facilities or examine the credentials of the people running the facility? Parents would stage a revolt. Like Schwab, Nadella wants to close the deal with you, promising the enormous benefits while downplaying the risk. Because if they need to get your consent, they're not going to tell you about the club they've got hidden behind their back if you protest. The hidden club is contained in the sentence. The potential benefits are unprecedented, and as this book concludes, public private leadership and partnership are essential. Here's the perspective I'm going to take about this sentence. This is the author giving his commentary on this guy, Nadella. Every time you hear the expression public private or partnership, I want you to replace it with the word fascism. Because you see, fascism, as practiced in both Mussolini's Italy and Hitler's Germany, was a public private partnership. This is how fascism differs from communism. The communists seized the means of production and tried to run these industries. They didn't do a good job. Mussolini and Hitler had a different idea. Government and big business were both powerful entities. A battle between these two groups would be unproductive, as communists found out to their dismay. But instead of a fight, a cunning leader might understand that a deal could be made. Big business leaders don't like workers who agitate for better working conditions and higher pay. As a first step, Mussolini and Hitler broke the labor unions. Once the workers were disarmed, the leaders were free to attack other countries and do what they wanted with their dissidents. Whenever you hear the word public private, I want you to translate it into your mind as a promise that the government will not hesitate to attack the people if they protest against the plans of big business. Know that. The government will not hesitate to attack the people if they protest against the plans of the big business. So it's important to know, and this is what we're dealing with. You're not dealing with what you see, how they tell you that they're here for you. Oh, the government is here to protect you. The government is on your side. The government wants better for you. That's a lie. Because as soon as you go against them, they're going to be ready to bust you in your head. Public trust in business, government, the media, and even civil society has fallen to the point where more than half of the world feels the current system is failing them. Wow, that's deep. That's a deep statement. Public trust in business, government, and media, and even civil service has fallen on to the point where more than half of the world feels the current system is failing them. Wow. More than half of the world feels like the current system is failing them. That is astounding. That is like, I'm astonished by that number. That over half of the people in the world believe that government is failing them. That's deep. The widening gap in trust between those in the country's top income quartile and the rest of the population indicates that social cohesion is fragile at best and very close to breaking down at worst. It is this precarious political and social context that we face both the opportunities and the challenges of a range of powerful emerging technologies, from artificial intelligence to biotechnologies, advanced materials to quantum computing, that will drive radical shifts in the way we live, and which I have described as compromising the fourth industrial revolution. But listen to this. And this world that Schwab and these Davos and these globalists and technocrats want to create, you'll have to worry about more than just government. In truth, it doesn't seem as if Schwab has much use for government unless it does exactly what he wants. Instead, Schwab is counting on big corporations to function as de facto governments. That's what it's about. That's ultimately what they want, de facto governments. But listen where it started from. There's probably no better expert in the world to address the origins of the fourth industrial revolution, Great Reset, than Patrick Wood. Remember that name, Patrick Wood. He's an economist by training. He's an author, a lecturer, who has studied the issue of globalization since the late 1970s. Wood first came, Wood first became interested in the question of powerful groups of elites when, as a young financial analyst and writer, he noticed that upon his election in 1976, President Jimmy Carter picked a number of his advisors from a group called the Trilateral Commission, founded in 1973 by David Rockefeller and Zbigniew Brzezinski, father of current MSNBC host Mika Brzezinski. In his 2016 book, Tenocracy Rising, Wood recounts the Carter Brzezinski relationships. President James Earl Carter, the Georgia peanut farmer turned politician who promised, I will never lie to you, was chosen to join the commission by Brzezinski in 1973. These are all facts. It was Brzezinski, in fact, who first identified Carter as a presidential timber and subsequently educated him in economics, foreign policy, and the ins and outs of world politics. Upon Carter's election, his first appointment placed Brzezinski as assistant to the president for national security matters. More commonly, he was called the head of the National Security Council because he only answered to the president. Some rightly said Brzezinski held the second most powerful position in the U.S. That's certainly not a bad position in which to find yourself, second only in power to the President of the United States. Who wouldn't want that gig, especially if it came without the need to do any campaigning? But this didn't happen without decades of prior work. This is where you time to go to school. Now you got to understand where the elites, where the globalists, where these people come from. Listen up. Who wouldn't want, okay. But this didn't happen without decades of prior work. And it certainly began prior to the creation of the Trilateral Commission in 1973. Woods, he's an economist. Look him up. Patrick Woods, he's an economist. He wrote a book, Tenacity Rising. It's a very, very, very good read. I haven't read it, but I read just awesome reviews, and I'm gonna get it like ASAP. I'll be ordering it this week. Okay. So his name is Patrick Wood, and he identifies the root of this globalist movement as beginning with the French philosopher. He identifies the roots of this globalist movement as beginning with the French philosopher Auguste Comte, generally credited as being the father of modern sociology and considered the first philosopher of science. In modern in the intellectual ferment of the day, it's easy to understand how he came to believe that scientific knowledge was the only authentic knowledge. This quickly gave rise to what's called scientism, professing that science alone is what can answer all questions. For those who came to identify as progressives, namely those who believe human society is evolving toward perfection, this religion of technocrats, dubbed tenocracy by its creators, offered a useful patch toward the achievement of their utopian dreams. As Wood explains, industrialization was enabled by science, technology, and invention. As knowledge increased, it was surmised that society must change along with it, or at least adapt to it. Progressives called for bigger government run by qualified managers with diminishing personal liberty and national sovereignty, but they simultaneously fought to reduce waste and increase efficiency in government. The emphasis on efficiency drove many progressives into tenocracy, since science appeared to be the only pathway to achieve it. Now, this was the words of Patrick Wolf, but here is the author of the book giving his commentary. It can then be seen how this new technocracy might interact with other such ideologies, such as progressivism, socialism, fascism, and even capitalism. The scientists and engineers would then be in control of society, but without having to contend with the pesky problems of democracy and individual rights. When I speak of democracy, my readers understand I'm not talking about a pure democracy, but our constitutional republic, a system of majority rule and minority rights, in which elected representatives are given authority to make decisions that they must defend at the next election if they wish to remain in office. Wood goes on to claim that many groups in history, such as Nazis, fascists, and communists, would adopt many of these principles, but were unwilling to allow the growth of a scientific elite leadership class who would oversee the society. They didn't want anything to do with that. They knew these groups may have been evil, but they understood a challenge to their authority when they saw it. Because of its open and democratic institutions, the West seemed to present the best opportunity for the creation of this scientific engineering elite or technocracy. The people simply had to be persuaded to accept this gentle tyranny, which would, of course, free them from all their worries. The colossal death toll of World War One, with more than 9 million dead, should have presented an enormous opportunity for the development of a technocratic state. But those brief dreams were dashed by the technological and social changes brought about by the war, which came to fruition with the Roaring Twenties. During the early part of the 20th century, the technocracy flame was further developed and kept alive by people like Frederick Taylor, an American mechanical engineer best known for his work, The Principle of Scientific Management, and Walter Rosenstrauch, a professor at Columbia University. Many of these ideas would be embraced by a group of intellectuals who broke away from Columbia to form what became known as the New School, led by two men, Thorstein Veblen and his young protege, Howard Scott. In 1922, in 1921, Veblen released his grand masterpiece, a book titled Engineers and the Price System, in which he wrote, if the country's productive industry were competently organized as a systematic whole and when then managed by competent technicians with an eye to maximize production of goods and services instead of now being manhandled by ignorant businessmen with an eye single to maximum profits. The resulting output of goods and services will doubtless exceed the current output by several 100%. Now, this was some facts from the, this was Thorstein Veblen, okay? And he was an intellectual from Columbia University, um, was a founder of the, I guess the whole the trilateral movement. Okay, but anyway, now this is Wood. This is the economist, right? That's like speaking against this whole technocratic, globalistic, takeover. Society was ripe for technocracy during the depths of the Great Depression. It certainly appeared that capitalism was dead. Joblessness, deflation, hunger, anger at politicians and capitalists, and other social stresses had people begging for an explanation as to what went wrong and what could be done to fix it. Technocracy, Inc. had both. Capitalism had died a natural death, and a technocracy oriented society would save them. The engineers, scientists, and technicians who would operate this technocratic utopia would eliminate all waste and corruption. People would only have to work 20 hours per week, and every person would have a job. Abundance would be everywhere. The moment of the technocrats has seemingly arrived. The carnage of millions dying in a world war was not enough. But surely, the President of the United States, Franklin Roosevelt, could be talked into such a scheme. Roosevelt did adopt, no, I'm not doing that. We're going to, okay, we're going to start here. Let's start with the Trilateral Commission, founded in 1973. That was the beginning of modern globalization. Modern globalization began in 1973. Globalization began and modern globalization began in 1973. So look this up. You have to look at the past to understand the present and to see where the future is going. It will not be televised. There's an assault for your freedom, for our very sovereignty, just to be human. And not just our freedom, but like our own mind and body. Like they want us to be void of like feelings. They want us to be not even having like, you know, love and emotions and sex. Like honestly, like if you really get to understand the plans of these people, huh? Everybody will be building a bunker. Everyone will be building bunkers. If only you know. If only you know what was on. You know what was really underneath their plans. These globalists, they are sick. They are tyrannical. They are evil. They are sadistic. They don't care about black, white, rich, or poor. At the end of the day, they only care about serving their purpose. Let's start with the Trilateral Commission, founded in 1973. That was the beginning of modern globalization. What happened in the years before 1973 was largely unsuccessful. What happened in the years before 73 was unsuccessful. And the global elite knew that. So they embarked on a new mission with the Trilateral Commission to essentially do an end run around national sovereignty around the world, meaning that they were going to all different type of countries, seeing who they could manipulate, who they could trick out of their own, whatever for their good, right? To kind of test their plan. And to create what they called a new international economic order. That was their marching orders. It was created by David Rockefeller, the chairman of Chase Manhattan Bank, and from the Rockefeller Oil dynasty. The other founder was a political scientist from Columbia University named Zbigniew Brzezinski. The two of them founded the Trilateral Commission. So this is all history, friends. This is history. Like this is not no conspiracy. Do your research. David, I'm sorry, yes, David Rockefeller and Zbigniew Brzezinski formed and founded the Trilateral Commission. The Trilateral Commission, they founded it in 1973. 1973. That's when a lot of things changed in America. And it happened all under the guise and why everybody was so caught up in the Vietnam War. That's when they do their most wicked acts. That's when they create their most sinister, plans, assaults. Is when, they create a crisis, which they did. They created the Cuban Missile Crisis, which created the tensions between Cuba and America, hence starting the Vietnam War. So this is what they do. You got to understand the government in which you are under. So that's the thing, and you call that a false flag. That's what they do. They'll create a false flag, meaning that they'll create the problem, then pretend to be the helper, you know, and then it's all up and stuck from there. It's all a hot fucking mess. So let's carry on. So those were the two creeps that founded the Trilateral Commission. The significance of Brzezinski being at Columbia University is that he was one of the founding members of the Trilateral Commission. He was aware of what tenocracy was because that's where it was developed in the 1930s. Remember, I told you in the 1930s, that's where, it really, really began. The seeds were really planted at that point. Brzezinski wrote a book called Between Two Ages, America's Role in the Tetranymic Era. That book foretold the tetranymic era we're living in today. That book endeared him to David Rockefeller, who was looking for a new way, I'm sorry, who was looking for a way to extend his monopoly power by capturing resources of the world. These were some greedy men, some evil, greedy men, some sick, evil, greedy men. The outlines of the story Patrick Wood told were clear and easy to follow. The tenocracy ideal, a world run, this is what the ideal is when we talk about tenocracy. So I'm breaking it down to you. Tenocracy. This is what tenocracy is so you can follow. I'm trying to give you some context. Okay? So, the ideal of tenocracy is a world run by engineers and scientists. That was essentially developed in the late 19th century and found an academic home at Columbia University in the 1930s. The philosophy did not sway Franklin Roosevelt, but did sway Adolf Hitler, who depended not on politicians but scientists and engineers to run his third rate. But Brzezinski, which is a founding member of the Trilateral Commission, he and David Rockefeller, Brzezinski further developed these ideas in his book, which caught the attention of David Rockefeller. The technocrats then saw an opportunity to rebrand their philosophy and, within a few short years, had captured the presidency with the election of Jimmy Carter and his new national security advisor, Zbigniew Brzezinski. If that's not some stuff, think about that. If that's not some stuff, all right? So now you have a guy, you have two guys, one that's rich and very powerful. Then you have another guy that's really smart and like crazy and this sick intellectual. And now you bring these two forces together. OMG. It was like the perfect sick dynamic duo of destruction, right? And so now they come up with this technocratic idea of wanting society not to be run by government, but that it should be run by scientists and engineers. Okay? Why would they want people to be controlled and led by engineers and scientists? Why? That's very strange to me that a government, well, it wasn't the government actually, it was these sick minds that believe that government should not run it and that it should be these engineers and scientists. But when they realized that it couldn't really go that way initially, okay, so then we have to play nice with government then. Hence, they were able to get, swing the 1976 presidential election of the United States. And that nominee who became president, Jimmy Carter. Trust me, this is like this is a map. This is a syllabus. This is this is everything actual factual. This is a way in which you can understand the mindset of these sick globalists, this sick shadow government that wants nothing more for us to be enslaved, to be their little roach minions. Like they look at us and we're no different from a roach. And whether we're white, black, blue, it does not matter. It does not matter. They want total control. They don't want us to be able to have even our own intelligent thought and original thought. They want our minds. They want our energy. They want our. I'm telling you, it's a sick situation. Listen up. I think it's important to understand that technocracy can't accurately be called communism or democracy. It is best understood as a monopoly on power, held jointly by big business and big government. And in all honesty, while big government may hold the club, the real power lies with the financial strength of big business. The robber barons of old, like the Rockefellers, they weren't interested in a vibrant free market. They didn't like unions, and their perfect world was the company town where the residents owned little and were dependent on the company for practically everything. The robber barons were interested in a closed market, a monopoly, or what might look to the public like relatively few players, when in truth, the same group of powerful individuals controlled all the various entities. So now that's the author of the book saying that. But now he's also speaking about now the economist Wood that always kind of question that whole thing, that whole trilateral commission. We'll continue with his explanation of the formation of the Trilateral Commission, the role of President Jimmy Carter, the participation of the United Nations, and the rise of China. Listen to this. This is a jewel. And the rise of China as an experimental laboratory for the technocratic ideal. I told you that it was all an idea. China was an idea. They, well, not China, but the plan for us, it was for us. They couldn't do it on U.S. soil. It would have been too crazy. We would have got crunk because, truth be told, we were more fearless, more patriotic, more understanding of unity in those dire times and those less modern times and those less, decadent times. We were more fearless. We were more unified. And so at the end of the day, you know, that's why they couldn't do it. They couldn't. So they had to take it to China. That's the thing. They the rise of the United Nations, the participation of the United Nations and the rise of China as an experimental laboratory for the technocratic ideal. So this is what we're talking about. When we talk about technocracy, we're talking about a society ran by engineers and scientists. And so they said, let's try this out on China. Let's try out this on China. And that's what they did. They tried it out on China, and China was the experimental bed for what they wanted to see ultimately for us. They couldn't come at us, you know, they couldn't. Because at that time, we really did care about, liberty. Freedom was important, and people did not care. Nobody didn't care about, because back then it wasn't, oh, my car, my nice car, oh, my family. Yeah, people have family. Oh, my job, and oh, my neighborhood. Oh, I'm not trying to get my precious clothes ruffled. I'm not trying to get my face dirty. I'm not trying to get my hands dirty. No, at that time in life, things were more raw, things were more, difficult, more challenging. And so people were ready to fight for whatever they had to fight for. So they knew they could not play out that experiment on U.S. soil. So they had to go to China. And listen, the two of them, David Rockefeller and Zbigniew Brzezinski, founded the Trilateral Commission. This new international economic order then immediately passed the baton to the United Nations. In 1974, the United Nations passed a resolution called the Establishment of a New International Economic Order with their language, and that's where it was introduced to the United Nations. From 1973 on, many things happened, specifically with China. This is where it got turned up. In 1976, when Jimmy Carter was elected and when Zbigniew Brzezinski became his national security advisor, and both Carter and his vice president, Walter Mondale, were members of the Trilateral Commission. Brzezinski is one of Brzezinski is the one who is credited with bringing Deng Xiaoping to the United States to wine and dine him and bring him back into the global economic fold. This is widely acknowledged in textbooks that Brzezinski was the brains behind the introduction of China to the world stage. So, do your research on this Brzezinski guy. He was the brains behind the introduction of China to the main stage. Here's another name. You might have heard of him, you might not have. I don't know how old you are. Henry Kissinger. Okay? This was all before my time. Henry Kissinger also had a big hand in that. Kissinger was also a founding member of the Trilateral Commission. So we got David Rockefeller, we got Zbigniew Brzezinski, and now we have Henry Kissinger as members of the Trilateral Commission. According to Wood, Patrick Wood, look him up. He's the economist that always knew something wasn't right with them guys, always knew something was fishy. According to Wood, the members of the Trilateral Commission had sufficient contacts among the foreign policy elite that they could reasonably expect to be placed in the top positions of government, regardless of whether they were a Republican or Democratic administration in power. President Nixon, a Republican, had Henry Kissinger as his national security advisor, and Democrat Jimmy Carter had Zbigniew Brzezinski as his national security advisor and confidant. The technocrats finally reached the center of American power in the 1970s. This is when everything started really going up. And again, so many people would not have known because what did they throw out there as the Mickey? What did they throw out there as the veil to cover your eyes in the 1970s? What was the most? Here's some trivia, friends, for $100. What was the biggest issue of the 1970s in America? Period. And everybody, most people are going to say the Vietnam War. Exactly. And that's what folks were worrying about. That's what people's minds were on. This Vietnam War. Children were dying. Young men were dying. People were coming home maimed and disfigured. And as we know, medically, technology was not advanced. People were suffering. It was a nasty time. And they created it. In essence, they killed all of those people. And yet, while they're doing that, while, their people, American soldiers, were dying, and the government said, okay, go ahead and die while we keep putting the fix. And trust me, it's, you know, how we testing out how to really kill you off in the future, where it won't have to be about war. It'll be subtle. It'll be incrementally. It'll be through false flags and fake national disasters. hmm Let's continue on. Listen to what it really was. This is Wood. This is Patrick Wood. This is the economist that's always fought against them. This is what he says. This is not Patrick Wood's book. This is another author's book, but Patrick Wood is cited many times in the book, and so this is what he says. China looked like North Korea does today. Check it out. The technocrats finally reached the center of American power in the 1970s. After more than 40 years of effort, and could begin putting their plans into action, starting with a test case for their ambitions. Their choice, not the United States, where they knew they'd run into predictable opposition. Like I just said, Americans wasn't going to have that. Instead, the technocrats chose China, as Wood explained. China looked like North Korea does today. They had no economic system. There was starvations. They had no industry, and it was a horrible, oppressive culture. However, it was a blank slate to do anything that the Rockefeller crowd wanted done. When Zbigniew Brzezinski got a hold of Deng Xiaoping, Brzezinski did not teach China about free market economics or capitalism. No. He taught them about technocracy. That's with having scientists and engineers run the system. That's one reason the ascendance of China has been so dramatic. They have excelled at using that, exploiting it, expanding it, and exporting it to the world. China is the poster child for technocracy. They have perfected surveillance, artificial intelligence, the use of social credit scores to keep their citizens in line, and strong arming the population, forcing them to do whatever they want. Listen to the government and listen to what China is, and they adopted that to America. Ain't that crazy? Ain't that crazy? Ain't that funny? That's insane. That's crazy. How they listen to this. Listen. This is insane. When Brzezinski, which is one of the founder members of the Trilateral, he bought Deng Xiaoping, which was a big guy from China, I guess maybe the prime minister or whatever, and he wooed them, sent them back with a blueprint. But it wasn't really so much to do that to them, his people, because remember, these globalists, they don't care about people. They are voidless. There's a hole in the God center of their hearts. They are soulless. And so when he brought him over to America, wooed him, wined and dined him, gave him the blueprint, sent them back, and that's why China is what they are today. Listen up. When Zbigniew Brzezinski got a hold of Deng Xiaoping Brzezinski, when Brzezinski got a hold of Deng Xiaoping, Brzezinski didn't teach China about free market economics or capitalism. He taught them about tenocracy, which is how you have engineers and scientists to control the country. He taught them about tenocracy. That's one reason the ascendance of China has been so dramatic. They have excelled at using that, exploiting it, expanding it, and exporting it to the world. China is the China is the poster child for tenocracy. They have perfected to keep they have perfected surveillance, artificial intelligence, and not surveillance, I mean super surveillance. You see that Minority Report and all that stuff? Where do you think they got that from? Where do you think they got that from? Look at the movie Minority Report and the advancements of technologies. Where do you think that was developed? That's one reason the ascendance of China has been so dramatic. They have excelled at using that blueprint for tenocracy, exploiting it, expanding it, and exporting it to the world. China is the poster child for tenocracy. They have perfected surveillance, artificial intelligence, the use of social credit scores to keep their citizens in line, and strong arming the population, forcing them to do whatever they want. If they don't comply willingly, they just start shooting them. That's what America will do. That's what we're facing, assault. That is basically the story of China and how it came to be where it is today. So listen to this. Wood continues to say the early members of the Trilateral Commission told us repeatedly that they were not interested in a political takeover. And yet, during the Carter administration, Carter and Mondale were members. That's President Jimmy Carter and his Vice President Mondale. They were members. Brzezinski was a member, and at one point, every cabinet member Carter had, except for one, was a member of the Trilateral Commission. It looked like a clean sweep. But what we found out was that America represented the policy generating strongman of global economics. And anybody who could get their hands on the engine of economics would be able to control the entire planet. That's a big jewel. Listen to that. And anybody who could get their hands on the engine of economics will be able to control the entire planet. And that's exactly what they did as time went onward from 1976. So this is the narrative of the author Patrick Wood, the economist that always fought against this government takeover, globalist tyranny. You know, the narrative of Patrick Wood conforms to the known facts about the early Trilateral Commission and China's entry into the global economic economy. These were not low-level government employees. They were the top officials in our government, and they were enacting plans they never discussed among the American people. However, they had to work slowly as they did not have the support of the voters for many of their initiatives. They would need to be present in every presidential administration going forward, as Wood detailed the various administrations. The technocrats have represented left and right, liberal and conservative. The political labels mean nothing to them. They operated through the Reagan administration. George H.W. Bush was a member of the Trilateral Commission. Then you had Bill Clinton and Al Gore, both of whom were members of the Trilateral Commission. They brought into their government many members of the Trilateral Commission. Then when George W. Bush, you had Dick Cheney, who was a powerful member of the Trilateral Commission. Then you had Obama, who was completely surrounded in his intelligence community by members of the Trilateral Commission. Completely surrounded. The same thing happened, maybe to a lesser extent, in the Trump administration. And now you have the Biden administration. Well, this book is a few years old. Okay. So here's Woods, the same economist that's a big critic of this Trilateral Commission, these technocrats. He said there was a paternalistic attitude. Paternalistic, I'm sure everybody knows what that means, a fatherly attitude by members of the Trilateral Commission regarding the rest of the world. They figured since they were the bright ones, the ones with PhDs and that sort of stuff, that they had a leg up on everybody else in deciding what was good and what was bad. We repeatedly ran into the attitude where what they say is something like, well, what we're doing is for everybody's good. It's for the global good. So why would anybody take exception to that? We took exception to it and we told them that. But they just couldn't understand why we'd be upset about their plans to help the world. It was just crazy. I still shake my head. This is really the heartbeat of what I call scientism. Scientism sets up science as a god. It's kind of an extension of humanism in a way. It sets up science as a god that can do nothing wrong. And they reject any other type of moral, ethical, or biblical restraint. It doesn't matter. All of this is just nonsense to them. And they believe the God of science is the only path to finding about. They believe that the God of science is the only path to finding out about the nature of man and the universe. This allows them to come up with some very strange ideas about their way being the only sensible way. And everybody else with a different idea is just a crackpot. I found Patrick Wood's comments. Now, this is the author talking about Patrick Woods now. I found Patrick Wood's comments to be extremely helpful in explaining the mindset of these globalist technocrats. They genuinely believe that they genuinely believe what they were saying. They think the rest of us are idiots in need of being saved by them. They reject all other sources of morality, being it religious, ethical, or moral. It is accurate to call them materialists, and yet even the most ardent materialists can still live an ethical life if they respect the rights of others, just as they respect these rights for themselves. In some ways, it's quite sad. As one might say, these globalists suffer from a God shaped hole in their soul where God used to be, and are they desperately trying to fill this void with the God of scientism? They do not engage with the moral and spiritual complexities of life, and thus most closely resemble a general who conducts a battle far from the front, forever blind to what's happening at the tip of the spear, where success or failure is determined. They live an antiseptic life, devoid of joy or suffering, and pass from this world with little or no spiritual development. These people are sick. They sad. They don't care about God. Like there is no after. Like it's all about just ego, and that's low vibration. The next subject I covered in my conversation with Wood was my frustration with something I couldn't find in the writings of Klaus Schwab or the globalists. Their writings spoke abundantly of communication, collaboration, and a common set of values, but contained little information about what happened to those who, after a period of communication, simply didn't agree to their common set of values. I asked if Wood would point out to me any sources that explain how these globalists plan to deal with dissenters. Those are people that's not going to agree. We can certainly see the anecdotal evidence for that with all the people who've been canceled, kicked out, thrown out, ashamed, and in some cases, probably murdered. The pattern has been very clear. Anybody who does not agree with their narrative is in jeopardy of being removed from the scene. It's kind of what China does. In China, they call it disappearing people. They haven't gone quite that far in the West to specifically kill somebody. But disappearing people is the name of the game. We see this in the medical community. For example, the Great Barrington Declaration opposing the COVID 19 lockdowns, masking regulations, and vaccine mandates had a couple 100,000 signatures, with about 3,000 being top scientists and medical professionals. Every one of those people was canceled by the censorship culture. And that wasn't by mistake. It was an intentional campaign to crush anybody who had an alternative narrative of COVID 19. And we see this all over the major media, social media, and with many large corporations who are censoring people they don't like for one reason or another. I found it difficult to disagree with anything that Wood was claiming. Anybody paying attention to the media understands that in the past several years, especially since the appearance of COVID 19, there has been nothing less than an assault on free speech. The old answer to the question of speech that people believe to be wrong is more speech to counter what is believed to be false. The answer to bad speech is good speech and trusting people to be able to tell the difference. This principle no longer seems to be part of the operating system of our civilization. Instead, the motives of the speaker were attacked, usually with some of the most heinous allegations possible today. And that person was removed from the discussion on the grounds that many found the comments objectionable. or that such speech created a significant risk of public harm. If we lose free speech, we lose our ability to think and can only blindly follow the dictates of those who believe they have our best interests at heart. Listen to me again. If we lose free speech, we lose our ability to think and can only blindly follow the dictates of those who believe they have our best interests at heart. One of the final questions I wanted Patrick Wood to address was something that has long bothered me. Because of our tradition of free speech in the West, as well as individual autonomy, we have a different operating system that an individual in China or Russia, which have a long history of cowering under the dictates of the latest authoritarian ruler. Although there have been suspicious deaths of dissidents in the West, I'd agree that little hard evidence has been presented to establish this as a pattern utilized by the powerful in our society. I asked Patrick whether he agreed that in the West it would be difficult to force these changes upon us, but if they could somehow get people to acquiesce to their plans, to remain silent, that it would greatly increase their chances of success. In other words, they could not succeed by force. However, they could succeed by subterfuge or somehow obtaining our consent, such as the old superstition about how a vampire could not enter a house without the invitation of the homeowner. We needed to invite, or at least acquiesce to, the entity of the vampire of globalism into our house. Wood detailed a specific change to the strategy of the globalists that came about around 1974. Let's move on. The game changed in 1973 with the formation of the Trilateral Commission. Prior to that, you had the old fashioned frontal assault, where they would just go and kill people, but not now. But listen to this. Listen what they want for us. The globalists are telling us directly how much they need to use the media to influence the public. It's even better if you can attach your persuasion to some type of image. Listen to what they say. These globalists are sick. But listen to a gentleman, Harry Goldwater. He ran for president, I guess, against Lyndon Johnson back in the day. And he was so skeptical of them. He knew something wasn't right. They was on some other type of time. He wasn't with it, and he didn't want to accept any of it. But yeah, it's about revolution. Let's talk about it. So ultimately, my friends, listen, let's get in the light. Let's rise above the assault on our souls. I look cute. I've lost weight. So my booty is not really popping. I ain't got no booty pop. My booty ain't popping. My booty ain't popping. Is your booty popping? Well, it don't matter if your booty popping, cause honey, we might all be in our resettle camp. And none of that stuff wouldn't matter when, you know, when the Gestapo busting down our door. Ain't nothing we can do. Yeah, she, right to the slaughter, dog. That's it. That's the way. That's when we will find ourselves. That's how we will find ourselves.